3 months ago, I walked into the most exclusive BMW dealership in downtown Chicago wearing a faded Cubs t-shirt, worn jeans with paint stains, and work boots that had seen better days. The salespeople took one look at me and suddenly became very busy with their phones, their computers, anything but helping the guy who clearly couldn't afford to be there. What they didn't know was that I had just sold my construction company for 8 figures, and I was carrying a cashier's check for $180,000 in my back pocket, enough to buy their most expensive car on the lot without financing. But this story isn't really about cars or money. It's about my father, who spent 35 years telling me I'd never amount to anything because I chose concrete and steel over college and corporate suits. It's about a family dinner where he planned to announce my failure to our entire extended family. And it's about the secret I'd been keeping that would change everything he thought he knew about success. My name is Mike Kowalski. I'm the son of a Polish immigrant who built his American dream on the belief that only white-collar work had real value. For decades, he saw my calloused hands as proof of my limitations. He was about to learn just how wrong he'd been, in front of everyone who mattered to him. This is the story of how I turned the tables on a lifetime of humiliation, bought the most expensive thing on 4 wheels with cash, and drove it straight to the family gathering where my father planned to shame me one last time. What happened next shocked everyone in that room, including me. My father, Stanislav Kowalski, came to Chicago from Krakow in 1978 with nothing but a suitcase and an unshakable belief that education was the only ladder out of poverty. He worked double shifts at a steel mill while putting himself through night school, eventually becoming an accountant at a prestigious firm downtown. To him, success wore a tie and carried a briefcase. Our family dinners were like performance reviews. Dad would sit at the head of our small kitchen table in our Bridgeport bungalow, still in his pressed shirt and slacks, grilling my older sister Anna and me about our grades, our plans, our futures. Anna was the golden child, straight A's, Northwestern University, now a lawyer married to another lawyer. I was the disappointment who preferred shop class to calculus. When I was 16, I made the mistake of telling him I wanted to skip college and learn construction. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the words that still echo in my head. Michael, in Poland, we had no choice but to work with our hands. In America, only fools choose it. The humiliation wasn't just private. At Anna's law school graduation party, surrounded by her accomplished classmates and their families, Dad introduced me to everyone as my son who's still figuring things out. I was 22, already running crews for a local contractor, but to him I was just a kid playing in the dirt. I watched him beam with pride talking about Anna's internship at a corporate firm while I stood there in my only good shirt, invisible. The pattern continued for years. Family gatherings became showcases for Anna's achievements and subtle reminders of my shortcomings. Anna just made partner, he'd announce to anyone who'd listen. When people asked about me, he'd change the subject or give vague answers about me working construction. But here's what Dad never bothered to learn. I wasn't just swinging a hammer. I was studying every aspect of the business, project management, cost estimation, building codes, client relations. While he saw dirty clothes, I was absorbing knowledge that would eventually make me more money than his entire career. The secret I'd been keeping for the past year was bigger than he could imagine. After 15 years of working for other people, I'd built my own construction company from the ground up. We specialized in luxury commercial projects, high-end restaurants, boutique hotels, corporate headquarters. My company, Kowalski Construction, had just completed the renovation of the Merchandise Mart's executive floors and landed a contract for a 50-story residential tower in River North. 3 months ago, a development group offered to buy my company. The number they proposed was so high I had to read the contract twice. But I hadn't told anyone in my family, not even Anna. Dad still thought I was just another guy with a tool belt, and I decided to keep it that way until the perfect moment presented itself. That moment was coming at Anna's anniversary dinner next week, where Dad had already started making his usual comments about how proud he was to have one successful child. This time, though, I had a plan that would change everything. Comment below and let us know where you're watching this from. I love connecting with people from all over the world who understand what it's like to prove doubters wrong. Anna's 10th wedding anniversary dinner was set for Sunday at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, Dad's choice, naturally. He'd been planning this for weeks, talking about how he wanted to celebrate real achievement, and how proud he was that Anna had built something meaningful with her life. The guest list read like a Polish-American success story: Uncle Tomasz the doctor, Aunt Christina the professor, Cousin Pavel the engineer, and their accomplished spouses and children. I almost didn't go. Saturday morning, as I was getting ready for what I knew would be another evening of thinly veiled disappointment, my phone rang. It was Anna. "Mike, I heard Dad talking to Mom about tomorrow," she said, her voice careful. "He's planning some kind of speech about the importance of choosing the right path in life. I think he's going to use you as an example of what not to do." My stomach dropped. What exactly did he say? Something about how proud he is that his daughter chose education over manual labor, and how that decision makes all the difference in building a legacy. She paused. "I'm sorry, Mike. I tried to talk him out of it, but you know how he gets." I hung up and stared at myself in the mirror. 37 years old, and my father was still trying to humiliate me in public. But this time was different. This time, I had $8.2 million in the bank and a plan that would make his speech very, very interesting. The BMW dealership visit had been spontaneous. I'd been driving past in my work truck when I saw the new M8 competition in the showroom window, a $180,000 beast that screamed success louder than any suit ever could. The idea hit me instantly: show up to dinner in something that cost more than most people's houses. Walking into that dealership in my work clothes had been like stepping into a different world. The showroom gleamed under perfect lighting, salespeople in expensive suits moved between cars that cost more than annual salaries. I stood there for 5 full minutes before anyone acknowledged my existence. "Can I help you with something?" The salesman's tone suggested I was lost. "I'd like to test drive the M8, I said simply. He looked me up and down. Paint-stained jeans, steel-toed boots, calloused hands. "That's a very expensive vehicle. Are you looking to finance or cash?" I said. The change in his demeanor was instant and nauseating. Suddenly I was "sir," and he was apologizing for the misunderstanding and offering me coffee while they prepared the paperwork. I'd bought the car that afternoon, signing the papers with hands that still smelled like concrete dust. But the real tension was building at home. Dad had called twice to remind me about dinner, each conversation a subtle reminder that I should dress appropriately and maybe think about what kind of impression I wanted to make on the family. Mom, caught in the middle as always, kept asking if I was okay and suggesting maybe I should just ignore whatever your father says. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times he'd introduced me as his son who works construction, with that slight wince, like he was apologizing for my existence. All the family gatherings where my achievements were invisible because they didn't come with a diploma. All the years of feeling like I had to defend my choices to a man who never bothered to understand them. Anna called again that morning. "Mike, promise me you won't start a fight tomorrow. I know Dad can be difficult, but it's my anniversary dinner. Can you just keep the peace?" I promised her I wouldn't start anything. But I didn't promise I wouldn't finish it. If this story is hitting home for you, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers and brings these stories to more people who need to hear them. Sunday evening arrived gray and cold, typical Chicago October weather. I spent an hour getting ready. Not the usual 5 minutes of throwing on clean clothes, but really preparing. I showered, trimmed my beard, put on the one expensive suit I owned. Then I walked to the garage and stared at the M8 competition sitting there like a sleeping predator, its alpine white paint gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The drive to Gibson's was surreal. The car handled like a dream, its twin-turbo V8 purring with restrained power. I pulled up to the valet stand and watched the attendant's eyes widen as I stepped out. This wasn't the Mike Kowalski my family was expecting. Inside, I spotted our party immediately, Dad holding court at a large table near the window, already deep into what looked like a story about Anna's latest case victory. Uncle Tomasz was nodding approvingly while Aunt Christina hung on every word. Anna saw me first and her jaw literally dropped. "Jesus, Mike," she whispered as I approached. "Is that a new car?" "Something like that," I said, kissing her cheek. Dad looked up and did a double take. "Michael? You look different." "Evening, Dad." I shook hands around the table, accepting congratulations on Anna's anniversary, making small talk about the weather and the Bears' terrible season. For the first hour, everything was normal. Dad was charming, telling stories about the old country, asking everyone about their work, their kids, their accomplishments. Then came dessert, and with it, Dad's announcement. "I want to say something," he began, standing and tapping his wine glass. The table fell silent. 10 years ago, Anna married David, and watching them build their life together, both lawyers, both successful, both contributing to society in meaningful ways, it makes me proud of the choices they made. I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach. "You see," he continued, "in America, we have opportunities our parents in Poland never had. The chance to build something with our minds instead of just our backs. To create value through education, through professional achievement, through making the right choices about our futures." Anna was staring at her plate. Mom was fidgeting with her napkin. Everyone else was nodding along, oblivious to where this was heading. "Some people," Dad said, his eyes finding mine across the table, "choose the easier path. They avoid the hard work of education, the discipline of professional development. They settle for jobs instead of careers, for getting by instead of getting ahead." The table was dead silent now. Pavel was looking uncomfortable. Uncle Tomasz was studying his coffee cup. "But Anna chose differently," Dad continued. "She chose to build something lasting, something she can be proud of. Something that creates real value in the world." That's when something inside me snapped. 37 years of this. 37 years of being the cautionary tale in his success stories. I stood up slowly. "Dad, can I ask you something?" He looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. How much do you think I made last year?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "Michael, this isn't the time. Humor me," I said. "Take a guess. How much money do you think someone who chose the easier path brings home?" He was clearly uncomfortable now. "I don't think that's appropriate dinner conversation." 50,000? I pressed. 75? What's your estimate for someone who settles for jobs instead of careers? "Michael, please," Mom started. "Because I'm curious," I continued, reaching into my jacket pocket and pulling out a folded document. "See, 3 months ago I sold Kowalski Construction, you know, that little company I've been building for the past 8 years while you've been apologizing for my existence, for $8.2 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face went through a spectrum of colors: confusion, disbelief, shock. "That's right," I said, unfolding the sales agreement. $8,200,000. For a company that specializes in luxury commercial construction. We just finished renovating the executive floors at the Merchandise Mart. You know, where your accounting firm has their offices. I built those conference rooms where you hold your important meetings." Uncle Tomasz was leaning forward, trying to process what he'd just heard. Aunt Christina looked like she'd seen a ghost. "The car I drove here tonight?" I continued. "It cost $180,000. I paid cash. With money I made from choosing the easier path." Dad was staring at the sales agreement like it was written in hieroglyphics. This can't be real. Kowalski Construction built half the high-end restaurants in River North, Dad. Where the company developers call when they want luxury work done right. While you were busy being embarrassed by my manual labor, I was building a business that employs 47 people and has contracts worth over $20 million. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. "So when you talk about creating value in the world, about building something lasting, about making the right choices, maybe next time, ask your son what he's been up to instead of assuming you already know." The table was frozen. Anna was staring at me with her mouth open. Mom had tears in her eyes. Dad looked like someone had just told him the sky was actually green. I stood up and dropped my napkin on the table. "Congratulations on your anniversary, Anna. David, you're a lucky man." I looked around the table one more time. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. I walked out of Gibson's, leaving behind 37 years of feeling small, and drove home in a car worth more than most people's houses, finally free from the weight of my father's disappointment. The aftermath was chaos. My phone started buzzing before I even made it home. Anna called first, crying and apologizing and demanding to know why I hadn't told her. Then Mom, speaking in rapid Polish, switching between pride and confusion and hurt that I'd kept this secret. Even Pavel called, saying he'd always known I was up to something big, but had never imagined this. Dad didn't call that night. Or the next day. For 72 hours, silence. Wednesday evening, I was reviewing contracts for my new consulting business when Anna showed up at my door unannounced. She looked exhausted. "He's been sitting in his study for 3 days," she said, accepting the beer I offered. "Mom says he won't eat, won't talk. He just keeps staring at that sales agreement you left on the table." I didn't leave anything. I printed it out. From the photo Pavel took with his phone. She gave me a look. "Really, Mike? $8 million and you told nobody?" I explained about the secrecy, the NDAs, the complex sale process that had taken months to finalize. How I'd wanted to wait until everything was official before saying anything. How Dad's constant dismissal had made me want to time the revelation perfectly. "But why hurt him like that?" she asked. "In front of everyone?" The question hit deeper than I expected. "Anna, do you know what it's like to be 37 years old and have your own father introduce you as a failure? To spend every family gathering feeling like I have to apologize for my existence?" She was quiet for a long moment. "He wasn't trying to hurt you, wasn't he? All those years of Anna the successful one, and Michael who's still figuring things out? All those speeches about choosing the right path, with me sitting right there. He was proud of you," she said softly. "He just didn't know how to show it." That's when she told me something that changed everything. 3 months earlier, Dad had gone to Uncle Tomasz asking for advice about reaching out to me. He'd been watching my company's work around the city, had even driven past some of our job sites. He knew I was doing well but didn't know how well, and didn't know how to bridge the gap that 30 years of miscommunication had created. "He's been carrying around business cards for Kowalski Construction in his wallet," Anna said. "Mom found them when she was doing laundry. He shows them to people at work, talks about my son the contractor, like he's proud. But he never learned how to say it to your face." The revelation shattered something inside me. All this time, I'd been fighting a war he'd already surrendered. Thursday morning, I drove to Dad's house. The M8 felt ridiculous in their modest Bridgeport neighborhood, a chrome and carbon reminder of how much had changed. Mom answered the door, hugged me too tight, and pointed toward the study. I found him sitting at his old oak desk, still in his pajamas at noon, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied something on his computer screen. When he looked up, his eyes were red. "I've been reading about your company," he said quietly. "The articles in Cranes, the Tribune piece about the Merchandise Mart project. Your employees, they say good things about you." I sat down across from him, feeling 12 years old again. $8 million, he continued, shaking his head. "Do you know what that means to someone who came here with nothing? What that represents?" "Dad, I failed you," he said, and his voice broke. "For 30 years, I failed to see what was right in front of me. I was so afraid you'd end up like the men I worked with at the steel mill, broken backs, broken dreams, that I couldn't see you were building something they never could." We talked for 4 hours. About Poland, about America, about the difference between surviving and thriving. About how his fear of blue-collar poverty had blinded him to blue-collar success. About how my resentment had kept me from understanding his perspective. The grand gesture, the expensive car, the dramatic revelation, suddenly felt childish. But maybe it had been necessary to break through decades of mutual misunderstanding. By Christmas, things had shifted completely. Dad started asking about my new consulting work, wanting to understand the business side of construction. He met with my former project managers, grilling them about building codes and profit margins like he was studying for an exam. When friends asked about his kids, he'd light up talking about Anna the lawyer and Michael the entrepreneur. The unexpected twist came in February. Dad called asking if I needed an accountant for my consulting business. His firm was downsizing, offering early retirement packages, and he was thinking about trying something new. At 68, Stanislav Kowalski wanted to work for his son. We're partners now, in a way neither of us expected. Kowalski Consulting, construction management and financial planning for luxury commercial projects. He handles the books and contracts while I manage the technical side. We meet for lunch every Tuesday at a diner in Bridgeport, two men who spent 30 years misunderstanding each other finally building something together. The M8 sits in my garage most days now. It served its purpose, breaking through barriers that words couldn't breach. But the real victory wasn't the money or the car or even the look on Dad's face that night at Gibson's. It was learning that sometimes the people we're fighting hardest against are fighting their own battles we never knew about. Success, it turns out, isn't just about proving doubters wrong. Sometimes it's about giving them permission to admit they were wrong to doubt in the first place. Looking back now, I realize that night at Gibson's wasn't really about humiliating my father or proving my worth to the family. It was about finally having the courage to step out from behind the shadow of other people's expectations and own my success completely. The construction business taught me that the strongest foundations are often invisible, buried underground, holding everything else up without fanfare or recognition. For years, I'd been building my life the same way, creating value that nobody could see because I was afraid to make it visible. My father's disappointment was real, but so was my own fear of claiming space in a world that had taught me to apologize for my choices. That expensive car became a symbol of something bigger than wealth. It represented the moment I stopped seeking permission to be proud of my work. Every project I'd completed, every employee I'd hired, every client relationship I'd built had been real achievements. They didn't need a college degree to validate them or a corporate title to make them meaningful. The hardest part of success isn't making the money or building the business. It's learning to value your own journey enough to share it with others, even when you know they might not understand. My father and I wasted 30 years talking past each other because neither of us had the courage to be vulnerable about what we actually wanted, his approval and his pride. If you're watching this and thinking about someone in your life who's never understood your path, remember this: their inability to see your value doesn't diminish it. Whether you're building with your hands, your mind, or your heart, the work you do matters. The people you serve matter. The life you're creating matters. But also remember that the people who doubt you might be carrying their own stories of fear and limitation. My father's criticism came from a place of love wrapped in terror that his son would struggle the way he had, that the American dream would somehow slip through our family's fingers. Understanding his fear didn't excuse the years of feeling small, but it helped me forgive both of us for the time we lost. Success looks different for everyone. For some people, it's the corner office and the corporate ladder. For others, it's the business they build from scratch or the craft they perfect over decades. The measure isn't the size of your paycheck or the prestige of your title, it's whether you're creating something meaningful with the gifts you've been given. Today, my father and I work together in ways I never imagined possible. He brings 40 years of financial expertise to construction projects that I design and manage. We're building something neither of us could have created alone, and every Tuesday lunch feels like a small miracle. That M8 competition is still in my garage, but these days I mostly drive my work truck. Some symbols are meant to break barriers, others are meant to remind you where you came from. Both have their place in the journey. If this story resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who need to hear stories about overcoming doubt and building something meaningful. Drop a comment and tell me about a time you had to prove someone wrong about your potential. What did you build when nobody was watching? How did you finally claim your success? I read every comment and your stories inspire the content we create here. Thanks for watching, and remember, your path is valid, your work matters, and your success belongs to you.